wasting any more time, let's move forward to the much awaited part of the webinar, where we would like to request our panelists to provide us with a deep insight into their unfiltered experiences, their never ending struggles, and the rigorous preparation that went on behind those glimmering achievements. It will be extremely helpful for all the students in DTU who are currently present here who are seeking quality advice for venturing in the same field as their exemplary seniors.
The panelists will be sharing a PowerPoint presentation with everyone, providing us a general overview into the basic pillars of a good application that stands out from the thousands of applications that these top colleges receive every single year. Furthermore, they will be giving a deep insight into their individual portfolios and their personal experiences throughout this amazing journey. I now request Aviral Agarwal sir to please present his screen and please take over.
Just a minute. I hope the presentation is visible.
Yes,
You're all right.
All right. I'll like Raghav to take the lead from here.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thanks Sankalp, Agay, and Ski for organizing this wonderful event because I completely understand how stressful college admissions is, and I think Avril, Aman, and Mehak might agree that as students, all we needed was someone to guide us, someone to mentor us, someone to give us some knowledge about how to go about our admissions. So, really, thank you, Ski, for organizing this. And we'll start with telling you about the basic structure of an MS application, the basic pillars of an MS application, which include letter of recommendations, statement of purpose, how to shortlist a university, how to go about testing. So let's get into it. Avril, next slide.
Hi everyone, this is Aman. So as Raghav just said, there are multiple aspects to your MS application on which your application is gauged and your offer at admission. So the first of those aspects is standardized testings. There are certain tests that you all need to undertake to complete your application. The first of which is the TOEFL IBT test. So this is a test which tests your basic proficiency in reading, listening, speaking, and writing of the English language. Frankly, this is a pretty easy test and you should cruise through it if you devote a week before the exam. As I said, this exam is of 120 marks. Usually universities expect 90 to 100 out of this 120. The scores that you get in your TOEFL will be valid for 2 years. That is, if you take exam today, that is 12th of May. Oh, April and yeah, May. So your marks will be valid till 2022 or 2023. Okay, so there's certain advice prep material which I use and my friends did too. The most important of which is the official guide. So see, the ETS official guide is the most important material you can get for preparing for TOEFL. It is verified content. It is content that is very similar to what you will get in the real exam. So now where can you get this official content is you should probably get it after some quick Google searches. They will be available in PDFs, or if you want, you can buy them from ETS official website. Okay, there's also this Noteful.com and Noteful TOEFL Mastery YouTube channel. I use this to prepare for my speaking and writing sections. You can use this too. This is very insightful, and the instructor in this channel has been making these videos for over a decade, so you can trust his expertise in this. Next slide, Aviral. Some extra tips for a TOEFL exam. You can note some of these if you find these helpful. Firstly, like I said, there will be 4 sections in an exam. In the listening section, you will be given sheets of paper and a pen. I would advise you that you make full use of these instruments and you make notes while listening to the listening sections, paragraphs, the conversations. Secondly, like I said, the note about the Noteful instructor, his YouTube channel. You should follow his structure. He has been helping students since years, and he knows what gets it done. And also, last tip is that you should be prepared for all sorts of external noises and disturbances during your speaking section. Make sure that what you speak in the microphone that you will provided in your speaking section is absolutely crisp and loud. Okay, next slide. The other standardized test that you will need to take, actually it has become quite optional now because of the whole COVID pandemic, but you may need to take this, and I did too, and most of the universities that I applied to did require it. So this is also a pretty long exam, another 3 hour 45-minute long strenuous exam. Its score is valid for 5 years, and a good score in this GRE exam is considered to be above 160 or 160 out of 117 quant, that is math section, and above 155 out of 117 verbal, that is the English section, and above 3.5 out of 6.0 in the writing section. I would advise you all to devote at least 2 months for this exam. This takes a little more practice and a little more time management than TOEFL. It has a slightly higher difficulty than, actually quite higher difficulty than TOEFL in terms of its verbal section especially. So for this exam, I would advise you all to once again use the ETS official guide. So ETS is the official agency that holds these exams. So you can trust on their content. This is as close to the official content that you will see on the exam day. So once again, I will advise you all to find these PDFs, and if you can't, you can contact Sankalp or Ayagya. I will forward the content that I have from these official sources to them, and you can get it by them. So once again, the ETS official content and also the Manhattan 5 LV book for quant, that is the math section. Also a very important source for study is GregMath. You can find this YouTube channel, or you can pay $5 a month, that is I guess less than 400 rupees for verbal training. GregMath is the best resource I had found during my verbal section practice, and I would highly advise you all to use it. He follows such a mathematical approach in solving all the verbal questions that you will cruise through it. Another very important part of the GRE prep is the mock test. See, GRE is a very long and a very strenuous exam, like I just said. So you will need to give multiple mock tests. You can't just go there unprepared, having not given a full-length mock test. You will have to give certain amount of mock tests to be ready for what you will see on the D-Day. So once again, the ETS power preps, the official content, this is more similar to what you will see on the exam day. You will get these ETS power preps the time you register for the exam. Also, you can try the Manhattan prep, the Magoosh prep, the Princeton and Kaplan prep, though I would not really recommend the Kaplan and Princeton as much as I would recommend the others, because their verbal is not really as close to the real exam as you would expect. Next slide, Abhidhar. Okay, so some tips, 2 tips for the exam. Once more, I cannot stress this enough. You have to be absolutely resilient on the D-Day. You need to be a machine. You cannot get emotional. You cannot get disheartened on the D-Day. There will be questions that you will miss that would just not click in your head. But what you need to do is skip them and come back for them later. As I've written in this tip, all questions carry equal weightage. Also, another very important tip, don't forget this. Do not mindlessly learn thousands of GRE words. They are not going to help you in the GRE verbal section. The GRE verbal is more logic oriented now and less vocabulary oriented. There are less than 1500 words, or in fact less than 1000 words that you need to rote learn. So I've noted 2 vocabulary lists that should do a job for you, which is the repeat of Indus top 700 and once again GregMath's vocab list. Yeah. So this is it about TOEFL and GRE. Next slide, Abhidhar.
Thank you, Aman. I'll take it from here. So when it comes to giving both of these standardized tests, you also need to prepare for the university shortlisting by then, because both of these tests requires you to select 4 universities where you will be sending the scores for free. And these four free scores are the ones you will be applying to again. So, and generally people take up their GRE in 3rd year, or since you have a 5 years gap for the score validity, you generally take earlier when GRE than applying for your colleges. So when it comes to university shortlisting, people generally prefer USA, Canada, Europe, Australia, and Singapore. When it comes to taking up a country or a continent to look for, I would say that the order I have mentioned, the countries are the people is the people's more preference towards them. So if you take up USA and Canada, most of the applicants apply in these schools. So they have to keep in mind when you're applying or selecting a program, the location serves as the most important aspect, I feel, because ultimately you'll be graduating from that particular country and you'll be working there for a few years if you don't come back to India. And certain amount of factors also go into it, whether are you planning to set a long time there, or are you planning to come back to India, or are you looking for PhD opportunities? So certain factor also comes into play when you're selecting the location. And I'll not delve too much into it. I think I'll be answering specific Q&A when it comes to the end of this presentation. So make sure you have your questions by then. Then it comes to the program type, which is also a very important aspect. I believe that are you choosing a STEM program or a non-STEM program? The advantage of STEM programs is that when you complete your master's degree, which is generally of 18 months or 24 months, you get an OPT extension, which is the optional practice training in that particular country, which is in US. So if you take up a STEM program in US, you get 1 year of OPT additional with the program. And apart from that, you get 2 more years because it's a STEM program. If you take up a non-STEM program, you only just get 1 year of your OPT. So basically, there's a difference of 2 years between non-STEM and STEM when it comes to your work life after your graduation, post-graduation. Then it comes to the course structure, which also I believe is a very important aspect, since most of our interests develop in undergrad project work and the coursework which we have done in our undergrad. So I believe that the course structure which you're going to pursue for the next 18 months or 24 months in the master's program also serves a very important role. You don't want to take up the coursework which are not aligned with your interest. And also you need to have a flexible course structure when you go into master's program, because you don't want to restrict yourself to a very particular or very definite field in our environmental engineering program. Then I believe faculty, which is something which most of the applicants miss upon on, that the faculty plays a very important role since you will be directly involved with them in the master's program, you're directly connected with them in the master's program, and you also have potential funding opportunities through these faculties. You might land up an RA-ship, which is a research assistantship, or a TA-ship, which is a teaching assistantship. If you choose the right faculty and you identify this faculty before you're choosing or shortlisting the university. Again, it's really important to find current students from all the social media platform you can, whether it be LinkedIn or Yocket, which is Yocket is a counseling website which you could take up. So people also generally mention their admits or the places they applied to, and you can find those people on LinkedIn. And so I did that, and I found many of my seniors from DTU also, and in all the universities I applied to, I took advice from them and also prepared accordingly for each university. So it's really important to connect with the seniors or the current students or the alumni who have passed out from that particular university as well. The reason why the rankings is at the last of this list is that because people generally keep it at the first point, and I believe that rankings is one part of that list, and you should not focus too much upon rankings because it ultimately depends at where your interest lies, how the course structure is, and how the faculty is. But even though if you want to look at some of the rankings, the websites are QS, US News, and Shanghai rankings. These are considered generally standardized rankings, and they analyze on many parameters. But again, my recommendation is that don't go too much for rankings, because ultimately your interest and your passion matters in this field. I think SOP will be taken up by Raghav.
Hi everyone. As you all might know beforehand, that SOP is the most crucial component of your application. As the name suggests, it's a statement of purpose. What's your purpose in life? What all you have done? How you are as an individual? What your experiences have been? So it's like a direct conversation that you can have with the admissions committee. Consider it as an opportunity to sell yourself university. I really like this point. People, I read this in a YouTube interview that an SOP is a way to sell yourself to the university. So it's more than just writing. It's like telling a story about yourself. one really important point that everyone stresses upon is that an SOP is not your CV. Remember that. Keep that in mind. This is rule number one for writing the SOP, that it is not a copy of your SOP. So refrain from making it your extended CV. Also, all of us talk about SOP, statement of purposes, but we miss out on personal history statements. So this was a surprise that we got. Some universities, apart from an SOP, also mandated submitting a personal history statement. Now, what is a personal history statement? Like an SOP talks about your academic experiences and your internships and projects and your course choices and etc. Personal history statement is more about how you are as an individual, how you can make the classroom of that particular university more diverse. So a personal history statement might also be there, so keep that in mind. And some colleges, for example Stanford, did have some supplementary questions apart from the SOP. They had like 5 questions, I suppose. Avril,
Four,
they
four, four
four
questions.
questions. These questions were apart from the SOP, so you might also have to encounter personal history statements and supplementary questions, so keep that in mind. And remember, this is not a disadvantage, it is an advantage. Why? Because SOPs have word limits. Some colleges have a word limit of 1,000 words, and you cannot portray all your life experiences in 1,000 words. So use your personal history statement and your supplementary questions wisely so that you can include stuff that you skipped or missed out in your SOP, right? So keep that in mind. Next slide, Avril. So what are the contents of an SOP? What does an SOP contain? First, your journey, partly personal and majorly academic experiences. One mistake that people often do is that they go on writing about their childhood experiences. The university doesn't want to know what you were doing when you were 10 years old. They want to know what you have done when you were in college. So majorly it should be about your academic experiences, partly about your personal, but majorly academic. Next is your
Okay,
course.
so under variable cost, again there will be a subdivision of semi-variable.
Meera, you can just mute. Yeah. So next point is you should include in SOP is what is your course of choice. This is a highly important thing because ultimately what matters is how your experiences and your internships and projects have culminated into you choosing this particular course. So what is your drive to pursue a master's degree? Your SOP must seep out passion. It must look that you are extremely passionate about this course. So why you are choosing this particular course is a really important and a pivotal part of your SOP. Next is your research interests. Keep in mind, if you're going for an MS, it is a research degree. So it is very important for you to be clear what your research interests are, and it is very important for you to research whether the university is offering research interests which align with yours. So your research interests are super important in SOP, and it's very important to articulate them correctly and also connect them with what the university's research opportunities are like. Fourth point is your short-term and long-term goals. So what do you expect out of an MS degree? What will be your short-term goal and what will be your long-term career goals after doing an MS degree? Next part is why this university. I think this is a very important part because this is the part where you can actually tell the university how desperate you are actually to get into that university and how passionate you are for that particular university. So research about their labs, their facilities, their course structures, their faculty, everything goes into this part, and this is a super crucial part. And the final and the most critical thing is the flow. Now, all these things that I've mentioned, all the points that I've mentioned here, shouldn't seem like discrete variables in the NSOP. They should all be connected like one story. It should be like a movie. Because see, your admissions committee or the faculty who is reviewing your SOP has to review hundreds of them. And I read it online that 10 to 12 minutes are spent on one application. So make sure that your SOP is so gripping that the faculty or the admissions committee does not get bored or does not skip certain parts out of it. Make it gripping, make it like a movie. Next slide, please, Avril. Now, SOP tips. I think if someone had told me this before, this would really have helped me. I think all of you might agree with me. First is be you. The university wants you. They want unique people. They want diversity in their classroom. Often what people do is they do analysis paralysis. They will go through YouTube, they'll go through online resources. I'm not saying that it's bad. Even I did, everyone does it, and I really recommend that you research about how to write an SOP, but do not plagiarize. Remember, do not try to be someone else. it's your first time writing an SOP, but the one who is reviewing your SOP has been doing it for the past 10 years. So he'll completely get to know that you are not presenting your own self, that you are trying to be someone else. So be you. Do not try to plagiarize. Next, a thing that I think is the most important thing, even while I remember when me and Avril were submitting our Stanford SOP on the last day, we were submitting our application, we were on call, and the only thing that we regretted was that we wished that we had more time to write our SOP. Because writing is one thing that doesn't happen in one day. Not everyone is a great writer. Even great writers can't write an SOP in one day. So take your time. Time is directly proportional to the quality of our SOP. Start drafting it as early as possible. I would recommend start doing it in September, October. Just I'm not saying that start writing the complete SOP. Just start drafting it. Start writing down ideas and stuff like that. Because the more time you have, the better it becomes over time. You need to keep revisiting it every week and keep adding stuff which you think you missed out. Keep editing, omitting stuff. That really brings out the best in you. And Aman, Mehak, and Avril also will agree on this that our first draft of our SOP and the last final SOP that we submitted were poles apart, completely different. So the more time you give it to it, the better it becomes automatically. Third important tip is organize your thoughts. I got this tip from my cousin. He's also in Stanford. He's doing his undergrad, and it really helped me. I started organizing my thoughts even before writing my SOP. So, what do I mean by organizing your thoughts? Say, for example, you're watching a Netflix show and you find a great phrase which you think might really add value to SOP. You're thinking about something, you think that thought might add value to SOP. So, just write it down. Write it down in mobile notes, write it down in a diary. It might help you out later when you're writing a recipe. So organize your thoughts, because in the end, your unique thoughts are what makes a difference in an application. Fourth is word limits and page limits. Remember this, every university will have different word limits. Some might have 1,000 word limit, others might have 1,500 word limit. Some might have a 1-page word limit, others might have a 2-page word limit. So instead of writing different word limits for different SOPs for each university, I would recommend write down a larger 1,500 word SOP, a final skeleton draft, which you will then omit and edit to make to suit to the particular word limit of the university. So don't write a separate SOP for everything. This was one thing that really stressed me and bugged me, was that I have to write SOPs for every different university. Say I'm applying to 10 different universities, so I'll have to write an SOP for every university. That's wrong. Write one SOP, bigger one, and then edit it to make it suit the word limits, and then edit their final university specific paragraphs, that why you want to go to the university, what faculty do you like, what research interests align with yours, and stuff like that. Next, know your stuff. Be as specific as possible about why you are applying to a particular university. Remember, the more specific you are, the higher are your chances of getting accepted, because the admission committee wants to know how passionate you are about that particular course. So go through their website, go through their lab facilities, go through their research interest, look up the professors who are teaching in that university, read their research articles. Go to that extent, because they want to see that you've literally scored their entire website, because that is what shows it to them that you are really passionate about getting into the university. So be as specific as you can. Write about the clubs and the extracurricular activities that the university is offering that you want to really pursue. So as specific as you can, just try to be as specific as you can. Final tip will be, don't simply describe your projects and internships. What I mean from that is that you have to include your academic achievements, your projects, your internships in your SOP, but do not simply write what you did or what was the topic of that particular research project. They are not interested in what you did. They are interested in how you did it. The process is more exciting than the final outcome. So, for example, rather than writing that I did a research titled this, write down what skills you applied on that research. What skills you used. For example, I used GIS, so I wrote that I did GIS. Then write about the failures you encountered, what difficulties you encountered in that process, what you learned out of it. They want to know your journey. They don't want to know what you have done. So show it to them how you've developed as an individual while doing a particular research project or an internship. I think these tips are really key, and we'll be sharing this slide with you. So don't worry, these tips will be with you forever. I think, Avril, you can just move on to the next slide now. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Raghav. So, hey guys, this is Mehak here. Moving over to the next most crucial element of while submitting your application is your letter of recommendation. So, typically, most of the top universities require around 3 letter of recommendations. That is 2 academic, and the third one is an option. That is, it could be an academic or a professional. And a couple of universities just accept 2 as well, such as ASU. So I would suggest that the projects that you're working on, or any of the research papers that you're working on, get an LOR from your mentors directly, and make sure that they highlight the research work that you have actually done. This is what I had done. I had worked on around 2 research papers, and both my mentors had written an LOR for me mentioning the kind of research that I had worked on. So that is something that will make your LOR stand apart from the other LORs that other students are going to be submitting. So make sure the LOR is not very generic. And if you have done an internship with a very good company, then make use of that opportunity and make sure you get a professional LOR as well from that particular company, because that is going to be super useful, because the company tag is going to be super useful. Like for me, it was, I feel. And yeah, so this is the most important thing. And if you are in case not working on any research paper, I was told by my seniors to get an LOR from the HOD or the professors rather than any assistant professors, in case you have not worked on any direct research with them. So yeah, this is all for LORs. Yeah, so now we will be explaining our profiles, starting with Aman.
Okay, so hi once again, guys. Before we answer your queries, we'll all quickly give a quick glimpse of our profiles. So I had applied to 6 universities in the US, and I was selected from one of those, which was Michigan. I had been accepted from these 6 these universities that I have listed in my profile, and I have committed to University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. So on the right, you can see my scores, my test scores, and my GPA. My GPA was pretty average, not bad, but average. So I had to make up for it in my GRE and TOEFL. I had done internships, a sales intern, and a volunteer work at an NGO. So while I say this, I want to let you all know that community work matters in your applications. They do value community work, your willingness to give back to the community. Other than that, I also did research work under Dr. Rajiv Kumar Mishra sir and under Mrs. Naveen Gupta ma'am. Both of these research projects were related to air pollution and their health impacts on humans. So yeah, next slide, I will.
All right. So thank you, Aman. Hi once again. So yeah, like as I discussed that each of one has listed our profiles here, and as you can see that I applied to like 10 universities. I got admits from 7, and 6 were in USA and 1 was in Canada. Let's not talk about rejects right now, but yeah, they are there to be looked at. So yeah, as you could see that my GRE and TOEFL were pretty okay-ish. I wouldn't say they were like the exceptional scores, but like my GPA, I would say would cover up for that. Just the opposite case of Aman. And when it comes to the internships, I interned at Suez, which was on campus, and I had a research internship at IIT Bombay and Center for Science and Environment, New Delhi. I think both of these research internships were a definite part of my SOP, and they also shaped up my SOP to a larger extent. And apart from that, I did research work which was under different faculties. 2 were under Dr. Rajiv Kumar Mishra in our department, and 1 was in the mechanical engineering department under Dr. Anil Kumar. So one thing I want to really like to point out here, when you're taking up research work in college, there's an option to take up research elective in the 5th semester, which was an option introduced in the particular year we were in. And I took up that elective with one of my fellow peers in my batch, and it happened to be a very fruitful opportunity because I got to work outside my department in the mechanical engineering department under Dr. Anil Kumar. It also shaped up to a very fruitful experience because first of all, I had reduced my coursework in that particular semester, and through that research elective, I could work for the next 2 years under that faculty, and also make sure that I could publish the research paper. So basically, research elective works this way that once you get your research work published in a reputed journal, the grades are awarded on the basis of that. So if you publish in a list of journals they have given according to university guidelines, you get a 9-point grade, and if they're exceptional journals, you get a 10-point grade. So I happen to get a 9-point grade with that. So the grade doesn't matter grade doesn't matter that much, because since you have published a research paper first of all, and you have also introduced a good aspect in your CV, so I would say that if you are interested into research work, I will say you go for this option. And even if unfortunately you can't complete the research paper on time, or you happen to get rejected by journals, there's always an option to remove that elective and take up a different elective in that particular semester, so you don't miss out on credits. This is a very good initiative, I believe, that DTU has taken, and you should, I think, go for it. Apart from that, volunteer work, same as Aman, I also interned at Chintan, and also I interned after first year at Global Peace Foundation. So I believe that these are two important aspects of my application again, because as you know, that's we mentioned that Stanford required some supplementary questions as well, and they shouldn't be redundant. They should be something which you have mentioned already in your SOP. So here I believe that this volunteer work which you do, because the general people in all applications ask about the diversity statement. So when I worked in Global Peace Foundation, I got a good content for that. And I think it's really important to explore domains outside your department, whether through community work, whether it's through startups, or whether through volunteer work. So do explore that, and I'll move on to the next slide. So we also mentioned some specific requirements. So I would say that for Stanford, I'll mention that there were some supplementary questions, around 4, and these keep changing each year. So there's no point of telling you this, but more or less, this is something which is apart from your SOP, which you can't write in your SOP, which you don't have the space to write in your SOP, because there's a word limit, as Raghav mentioned. So supplementary questions is a good way to mention that part of your application which you missed out on SOP or in your CV as well. Apart from that, personal history statement, diversity statement, is generally asked by universities. It's kept optional for Stanford, but like there was an option to mention it, so I did. And some university also requires an introductory video, which is just a 2-minute video about yourself. And like University of I think Columbia requires it. So, and Duke also required it for some of its applications. So this was also an aspect I really wanted to mention. Moving on to the next slide.
Okay, thanks, Amirul. So as you can see, I had applied to around total 7 universities. 5 of them were in the US. I got accepted into 4 of them, and I got 1 reject from the US. And I had applied to 2 universities in the Netherlands, and I got 1 reject from Netherlands and 1 acceptance. So I had made sure basically to align my profile in one field itself. So I did a total of 3 internships. 2 of them were in the technical domain that was related to water engineering. And the third one, I worked in the climate change and sustainability division of Ernst & Young. So that was a non-technical division, but it was in the sustainability division. So it was pretty much aligned with what I'm applying for. And I also had I had also done some volunteer work. I had spent time at Shubhash Shiksha NGO that is associated with our university as well. I worked on 2 research papers that are still under review to be published in journals. And apart from that, I had also mentioned about a couple of my management skills while being associated with the societies. So these are the 3 PORs I received. Moving over to the next slide. So basically, these were a couple of documents that are very important while you apply to Carnegie Mellon. So just like Stanford, Carnegie also required 3 essays. Each essay is 350 words each. So you don't have to worry about the essay because it is similar to your SOP. They basically want to know your goals and ambitions and basically what is your career plan, what is your goal after you're done with your grad school. So you have to make sure that you're very straightforward with your answer and you stick to the word limit. Then apart from that, you have 3 letter of recommendations, IELTS or TOEFL's, resume, and additional work attachments. That is where I attached my research work, which was that is very important. So make sure if you have worked on any research paper or project, you attach them separately over there in that section. Then last year GRE was an option, so but you can see how it goes for your year. And consolidated result, which you can get, you will have to talk to the admin department and you can ask them for a consolidated result at the time of your application. Yeah.
Just an additional note that this is the requirement majorly for all the universities, not the 3 essays. So also make sure that the requirement the Mehak just mentioned right now, that the letter of recommendation, the TOEFL score, GRE score. So yeah, like these are the requirements generally for all the universities. Just that 3 essays, which is 350 words each, is for Carnegie Mellon. So just keep that in mind. We missed out on that.
Yeah. So hello everyone again. I did apply to both US and Canada. However, I applied to UBC and U Toronto in Canada, and I got rejected from both. But in US, I managed to get good admits. I think the defining factor which really, I think which affected my Canadian applications was my GPA. And let me tell you that do not fret a lot about the GPA. I had a GPA of 8.18 aggregate. And I used to fret a lot about it that I don't have a decent enough GPA to get into colleges like Stanford or UIUC or UMich. But to be very honest, US institutions do not put much stress on GPA. However, the Canadian universities really want a GPA to be high. They want a GPA to be soaring high. But as I said, a GPA above 7.5 will be a great GPA to have for applying to US. So if you've got a GPA below 7, try working hard on your coursework and get your GPA up. My GRE score was pretty decent. I think that was a strong point in my application, and I really did practice a lot. With GRE, I would like to give a tip that practice is the key. The more mock tests you give, the more vocabulary words you revise, the better it becomes. And put a lot of stress on mock tests. Keep giving mock tests. That's my advice. My internships, I had 3 internships. I was volunteering intern at Chintan, like Aman and Aviril. I was an industrial trainee under Dr. R.K. Mishra sir at DTU Air Pollution and Acoustics Lab. And then I was an intern at Pollution War Room, where I worked in the stubble burning team at the Dialogue and Development Commission of Delhi. I had 3 research projects. 2 of them are still under review in international journals. I worked on Dr. R.K. Mishra sir and Ms. Laveen Gupta ma'am. Under R.K. Mishra sir, my topic was related to air quality. And with Mrs. Laveen Gupta ma'am, my topic was greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. I have got 1 conference publication under Mrs. Laveen Gupta. It was in the air quality and human health domain. Apart from that, I think what really made some impact in my application was my initiatives and startups. I started a e-waste pickup service in my locality where I used to collect e-waste monthly from various blocks in Greater Kailash, and then I used to give it to a government authorized producer responsibility organization who used to responsibly treat it, recycle it, and refurbish it. My second startup was Rural Invest. So Rural Invest is an app. It's available on Android and iOS both, where you can invest in mutual funds completely commission free. It was aimed at the rural strata of a society, because generally they don't have enough financial literacy about it, and they don't have technical know-how to invest in stock market per se. So I think my startups really helped with my application to Stanford University. As you know, Stanford really supports entrepreneurial spirit. And trust me, if you do not have a lot of research projects or you do not have publications, you can like really start an initiative, start a startup that will really help you. And please do not stress a lot about not getting your papers published in an international journal. To be honest, I used to stress out a lot about it. Although because I really worked hard on it, and I spent like almost like 2 years working on research projects, and then they didn't get published, and I couldn't write them down in my application. So I was quite worried. So do not worry about it. Your publication doesn't matter. The work you have done, what skills you've developed, they do matter. So that's all I would like to say. Thank you, everyone.
All right, so we'll be opening the floor for questions. And before I conclude this presentation, I would like to just mention that the point that Raghav mentioned, that the publications really don't matter, so don't stress a lot on them. I got lucky when it comes to international journal, but I don't believe that they were the defining point in my applications. They really were the brownie point, but they were not the defining points. I would really like to mention that. Apart from the GRE score, I think he was pretty modest by saying that he got a 329 score, which is decent. It's a really exceptional score. So the higher you aim for GRE, it's the better. And TOEFL scores really don't matter that much. And as you said, GPA also doesn't matter that much. It's more upon what you experience the journey of your undergrad life. With that, I conclude the presentation.
Also, I would like to add one point that Avril said that publications do not matter. That's true, but that doesn't mean that you should not pursue research project. You should definitely do
Right.
that because it's a great learning experience and it gives you a lot of content that you can add into your SOP. And it really gives you the edge when you write about what all you have done, what other undergraduate students might not have done. So do it for your personal skill development. Do it for learning skills like data analytics, GIS, and stuff like that. So do not publication should not be your aim. Learning should be your aim.
Well put. So Sankalp and Agya, if you have any questions for us, we'll be happy to answer them.
I am really sorry, sir, to interrupt you in between, but I must say on behalf of everyone that it was a really insightful session and an insightful presentation. Also, we have Professor A.K. Srivastava sir among us. If he can give his thoughts on the presentation, it would be extremely grateful.
A very good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon to all of you. Good afternoon. Hope everybody is okay, fine, and they are keeping themselves safe. I am very happy to see that so many faces. They are very happy to join their further study in different very good university of world. And I'm totally agreeing with what the conversation was going on. So first of all, I want to congratulate all the candidates, all the students who has got selected at different top class universities of the world by pursuing doing their BTech in environmental engineering or civil engineering at DTU. And I am sure that the students of DTU, particularly civil and environmental engineering students, they cannot beat anywhere in the world because they have been trained and they are so soft and they are so hardworking. Because see, I see Raghav, I remember just first year or second year of Raghav, how he was passionate about his research or this thing and that thing. And I tell you, very few university in India, the students in the first year and second year start thinking about the research or startup or internship. So this is the environment you get. See, and I'm also thankful to the students because now they are living from DTU, but they thought that okay, I should do this type of programs so that the coming students will get the benefit and they will not have to search here and there for what they will do if they want to pursue further in the different part of the university. That is the beauty, that we are not keeping ourselves maintained. We are trying that our other students or other colleagues or other junior students shall also get 100% benefit, because writing 2 slides, for writing the 2 slides present in front of you people, how much they have worked, you cannot think how much they have worked. Now what you can do, that they are just concluding the things and they are giving you that you should prepare like that. That is going to be a great help. To a very big consultant can also not give you this type of idea. So I am thankful to all the students, and I am especially thankful to the SKI that they are keeping themselves contemporary, and whatever the relevant things which is useful for our students, they always do the seminar, workshop, and they have the very good two-way communications between the different students. So I am very thankful to all, and again I congratulate everybody. And one thing I am sure I should tell you, that now these days the world is wants to see the student not only as a good student, he wants the student to be a good human being also. So what you are doing for your society, अगर मान लो किसी को तकलीफ हो रहा है तो उससे आपको तकलीफ होता है कि नहीं, ये जानना बहुत जरूरी है उन लोगों के लिए। वो इसलिए ऐसा पूछते हैं भाई, अगर आपके पड़ोस में कोई प्रॉब्लम में है तो उस प्रॉब्लम से आप क्या खुश होते हो, या उस प्रॉब्लम को आप फील करते हो, हाउ मच यू टच विद दैट प्रॉब्लम, हाउ मच यू आर पैशनेट अबाउट दैट, मतलब केयरिंग फॉर अदर्स, सोसाइटी से आपका क्या इंटरेक्शन है, ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट हो गया है। और ये हम समझते हैं कि डीटीयू में इसको बहुत ज्यादा अच्छे से निभाया जाता है। डीटीयू में इतनी सोसाइटीज हैं, है ना, कि कई बार हम लोग जब काउंट करना शुरू करते हैं तो करीब करीब 500-600 सोसाइटी के आसपास डीटीयू के अंदर काम कर रही है, और सब लोग अपने अपने फील्ड में रिलेवेंट है। work for the society, and not only work for the society to get the admission in the MS, to get the benefit somewhere. ऐसा नहीं करना है. That you do it now and you keep on doing for your society. Then only with a good professional you will have the good human being also, and then only that India or world at large will have the benefits. With these words, I am thankful to the SKI that they are doing this thing, and I am thankful to the graduating students who are going to get that admissions in very good universities. And I will happy that they will keep in touch with us and keep our students guiding about their future journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you
I
very
am
much,
very
sir.
thankful to our faculty advisor, Professor E.K. Shrestha sir, for his kind words. Now, we would be extremely grateful if our panelists can answer some of our questions.
Let me add one thing. I think A.K. Shrestha sir really, he was very right in saying that how sensitive you are and your empathy really matters. And I think in your SOPs, when you show empathy, when you show a passion for a particular cause, or show how your research work or your project work have impacted the society, I think that really brings value, as they are really looking for empathetic individuals now. So I think that is a point that we missed, and like A.K. Shrestha sir really explained it quite well.
So coming to questions, sir, I really listened to your presentation. I have one question, like, is volunteering or community involvement a major chunk of the differentiating factor when it comes to applications? Like, for example, if it is missing, will it really affect one's chances of making to top universities?
Okay, I shall answer that question because like I interned at two volunteering organizations. So my outlook has been pretty different from them because it should be what makes you stand out. So if it's something which really stands out in your application, you should definitely go and mention it. For example, we all three interned at Chintan, but the experience we gained from working at organization matters, not the organization itself matters. So we three might have a completely different outlook from it. Some might have got a bit more touched when they work there, or some might have not got a bit more touched when it comes to your applications. So it's not the necessary part per se, but if you think that you have time, you have a passion for it, for the volunteer work which you're talking about, I think you should go for it because it's really good to have a complete dynamic profile. You shouldn't restrict yourself to just GPA or just research projects. Raghav explored the startup option. I explored the volunteering option. Aman explored different options. So like this is really important when it comes to application, that you have to present a complete profile. It's not just you have to do volunteering work or some research work. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so now we'll be taking some questions from the members who are present here. The first, Lakshya Agarwal. You can unmute.
Hello, good evening, sir. Good evening, seniors. I had one doubt, like, what should I aim for, like MTech or MS? I'm not sure about that. So, can you throw light on that? Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible, Lakshay. I think if you want to pursue a master's, I think you are clear that you like the subject you're doing, and therefore you really want to pursue a master's, be it MTech or MS. So the difference is just the name. A master's degree in engineering in India is called an MTech, and a master's degree in engineering in America is called an MS. So that's the only difference between an MS and an MTech, and you get both. You get similar coursework in both, similar opportunities in both. However, there's also an opportunity of pursuing an M engineering in Canadian and American universities. That is a more professional course where you straight away want to get into the industry. And an MS is a more research focused course where research is the main priority. And the differentiating factor between an MS and an M engineering is that after an MS, you can pursue a PhD degree. However, after an M engineering, it's your culminating degree, and that you go straight into the industry after that. So in M engineering, you cannot pursue a PhD. So if you've got the research mindset, if you really want to do research in your particular field, I would suggest going for an MS. And if you want to hop onto the industry, I think going for an M engineering will be fine. The difference that you talked about, MTech and MS, is just the name of the degree. That's different.
It also comes down to where are you planning to find a job once you're done with that school. And the reason we particularly applied to the US was because it is a developed country, so it basically has a lot of opportunities in the field of environmental engineering. So if you see most of the top companies, they have their head offices in the US. So that was one of the major reasons. Having a lot of opportunities and scope in the country was why we particularly applied to the US. And otherwise, you can look at opportunity for MTech as well. But yeah, it particularly comes down to where are you planning to work and settle down once you're done with grad school.
In fact, I beg to differ with Mehak on this. I would say that when it comes to where you want to work, even if you want to work in India, I think India is a great place to work in the environmental field because it's still growing and there's plenty of potential. So you can pursue an MS in the US, come back to India, work here, then start your own agency. It's completely different. So you can also, it's not that you after you do an MS you have to stay in the US.
No,
You
you
can come
have
back to
to
India and you
see.
should come back to India.
Thank you
So
very
like
much.
that's just
And just another question, like how can I, like right now these are tough times, so how can I start in research work right now, and research work and internships, like
I
right
think
now, how can I explore them?
Mm, you should look on the D2 website. You should see what are the research interests of the different professors in your department or the other departments. If you find a research interest that aligns with your interest, you should email the professor. You should tell them about how you feel about their work, that you were impressed by their work, and that you would like to work with them. If there's an opportunity, they'll let you know. Actually, the both of these research papers that I did, they were both conducted absolutely online. There was no lab work, nothing. I did all of it on my laptop, sitting from my home. So
yeah,
just
I
email them.
completely agree with Aman.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank
even
you
my
very
last
much.
research was completely done during the pandemic, so we
Right,
could
right.
not go to the campus to carry out any experimentation. It was completely done at home on our laptops. Yeah.
Okay, I believe that
Okay,
answers
thank
the
you very
question.
much.
Okay, so the next question.
Sankalp, I have one question.
Okay.
Considering all this pandemic situation as well as visa situation, do you guys still think that US acts as a lucrative destination for graduate study, like taking into account the work opportunities it offers now compared to a decade or half a decade ago?
Shall I answer that question or anyone of the panelists?
I think Avril, you can go ahead.
Right. So when we applied, like the pandemic was when the first wave, so-called first wave of coronavirus was going on. So we were hoping that things would get when we'll go for our masters. But the things are really uncertain right now. I can't now say that things will be better the next year. I wouldn't be the person to say this. So I would just, my recommendation for this pandemic also, just don't think about it, don't stress about it too much. If you are at your mental peace these days, if your family is safe, if everyone is safe around you, you can definitely apply for masters this years, but it really requires you to have that focus right now. So I know that people living in Delhi are, and families are in emergency. I have been looking at that at the ground level. So don't go for it if you think that your families or someone is in some kind of trouble, which I know there are. I would just say if you want to delay, you can delay it for a year. Universities also understand that the situation is really grim, and US university or any other universities are really aware about the situation in India. So I believe that you shouldn't too much worry about the pandemic. About if you have planned for master, you should just do your own thing. If you have the right mental peace, the right resources with you, I think you should go for the masters this year also if you want to apply, if you want to go to the US next year, or if you want to wait for an year, do a job or something. The opportunities are still there. So don't stress more upon the pandemic situation right now.
Yeah, and many universities do have an option of deferment. So if the situation is not right, or if there is any visa issue, you can always write to them, and they're very flexible, and they do respond very quickly. So you can talk to them and get your admission deferred up to a semester or up to a year also.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, we have one question in the chat. What is the earliest time to submit applications, and till which semester will the CGPA be considered?
Should I take this question?
Yeah.
So usually for the fall admits, the deadlines are around December and January. So I would say that what was the question? Could you please repeat it again?
What is the earliest time to submit applications, and till which semester will the CGPA be
Yeah,
considered?
so the CGPA that we submit, usually it's up to 6 semesters. We've all given our transcripts for the 6 semesters, and for the remaining 2 semesters, we'll be submitting our transcripts when our degrees with us. So after your 6 semesters is complete, once you have the 6 semester transcripts, you have to send all the transcripts together to the university. So your CGPA, aggregate CGPA up to the 6 semester will be counted. And generally the deadlines are December 15, Jan 1, or Jan 15 for fall applications.
Thank you, sir.
This is particular for US universities. For European universities, it is always a bit delayed. So your applications can also, deadlines can also be up to April or May for European universities.
Also, as you asked the earliest time to submit your applications, I guess the application portals usually open by September or October for fall admissions in the next year. So you can apply early, and that does have many benefits.
Now, if Mehika Sinkla can open her mic to ask a question.
Good evening, everybody. My question is for all the panelists. If you could mention just one thing or one achievement that you thought stood out in your application, which was like cardinal and your application got accepted.
Hi, should I begin?
Yeah,
I think so. Hi, Mehika. So I think it doesn't matter like what stand out in your application, because ultimately you don't know what the review committee thinks stood out in your application. I believe if there's one thing which could stand out for each one of us, I would call it the SOP. I don't believe your GPA or GRE or your TOEFL score or your volunteer work or your research paper stand out. It's just the SOP, the content you've written in your SOP which stands out, not a particular research project or a volunteer work.
See, the thing is that the admission committees are not really transparent with their admission processes and the weightage of different parameters. So we can't really tell which parameter had the highest weightage and the highest impact in our application. You just have to work your best to improve your holistic application.
Right. I completely agree with Aman on this. I think the more well-rounded your application is, the better it becomes. And try to explore as many avenues as you can. They want to see your determination. They want to see your passion. They don't want to see what you've achieved or what you're not. How you portray it in your SOP, how you write down your experiences, how you frame your SOP, that really matters. I think the statement of purpose is the most crucial component, as I also mentioned it in my slides. So I think give a lot of time to your SOP if that is your defining document.
Okay, that was a
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
very well was answer. Now the next question is from Nimisha Singla.
Thank you again. Hello all, good evening, and thank you so much for the insight about your experiences. I have a couple of questions. I don't hope to scare anybody off or anything like that. But I'll start. So firstly, that since obviously this is a one-shot thing, and you cannot only apply to a single university, and you apply to multiple universities. So how tiring is the process to customize your application to all the universities? And does it mean that you're lying somewhere? Because I mean, obviously your heart will be to apply to only say 1 or 2 places, but then you're applying to 7 places, and then you have to do the research for all of them, look into the backgrounds of the labs, the professors, and everything. So how soul-sucking is that?
See the smile on everyone's faces. You can see that what was we were going through. So that's what I said. When you're applying, you should have a particular amount of mental peace. And right now the situation is really grim. So moving on, like when we were shortlisting the universities, I think your question was that how how many universities should we choose, and what should be the factors on it? Am I right?
Not my question. I mean, I think that depends on everybody's monetary status as well, right? I mean, because that
Right.
No, I mean, my question is how. I mean, I just mean that when you're customizing your application, it's a lot of work which goes into it. So, are you lying somewhere when you're doing that work, and will it reflect on your SOP that you're not really interested in this university? I mean, I'm just asking how strenuous it was for you.
Lying somewhere, like telling a lie.
Yeah, like I mean, because I mean,
No,
you can't
no,
want to study at all 7 or 8 of those universities when you're applying to.
No, you're not lying
Or
somewhere.
can you?
No. Obviously, you can, but I wouldn't recommend. The reason being is that even if you lie in your SOP, it won't. Like how well you can lie depends upon that also. But I wouldn't recommend lying because when you lie something, it doesn't reflect a personal experience. And these people who are reviewing your SOPs are not dumb. They know when you are lying about it, and no matter how well written it is, it really shows up. And it's not a good practice to lie. Also, I am a very ethical person when it comes to that.
Obviously,
People,
why not?
people, and when you're talking about the exhausting process of application, is definitely exhausting. I think all of them will agree to it, and it's really important that you have a certain amount of patience when you apply. Because for my particular application, what happened was I missed upon contacting one of the LORs, and at the last day of my application, just a few hours before my application, it got completed. So I am not the best person for time management skills. I think Raghav and Aman or Mehek did a good job there, and they have a lot of patience in them. But I was someone who was just applying on the very last day of the application. So I wouldn't recommend that. Just to make sure your application is completed 1 week before the deadline.
I think Aviral very rightly pointed out that patience is key, and I think it's the most important factor that comes to when you're managing your mental peace while applying to university, because a lot of research is required before writing an SOP or before even starting your application. So I would say, rather than see, stress is there. Stress, you cannot eliminate stress out of everything. But I think if you commit to the process and you stay determined, you stay persistent in your efforts, I think it completely like it. The after the period of application, after it gets over, after you get admits, you feel so happy that you encountered that stress and that you committed to the process. So if you stay committed, I think stress is just a substitute for stress is just it's just there with you all the time. So you don't need to like worry a lot about it. Just stay committed to your process. Just stay persistent and do your stuff. That's it.
All right. So to just ensure that I have the right takeaway from this question, I think only apply to universities where you genuinely want to study, and just find a reason to study there and commit to it. And
also, I think if you are writing something in your SOP, you'll only write it if you really like it. I think when it comes to applying to university, I don't think everyone has that set of ethics. No one would lie because it's completely evident when you write it down whether you are saying the truth or not. So you'll only incorporate a particular component in the SOP if you are really committed to that. Say for instance.
No, my question was sorry. I'm sorry to cut you off. Please continue.
No, it's completely fine. You can ask a question.
So my question was coming from a place of where I'm going like, oh, I really want to study in IIT M. Oh, I really want to study in IIT B. Oh, I really want to study here. So I was just saying that you cannot really want to study at all of these three places. So is that somewhere you're fibbing or doing that?
Are you referring to universities? Are you referring to safety schools that you think you will surely get in, but your heart doesn't lie there? But you're just applying for these.
Exactly. Yeah. This is going for that.
Right.
Yeah. No, actually, you will have to go through the research work, and you will have to you will have to make efforts. The same amount of efforts will be required for the same. So no one can really comment on that. It completely depends on how you end up writing it and how you do research. You will have to particularly go on their website, look at the research professors, and then, try highlighting their research work, what interested you. So you will have to lie. But I would say you're spending $90 in an application, and some universities even require $120. So make sure you spend that wisely. Don't just apply for the sake of applying and just spend money like that.
Also, when it comes to safe schools, there are n number of schools. So you will definitely choose the ones where your interests lie or where your interests are aligned with the faculty research interests. So once you start researching, it will be pretty clear in your mind where you want to apply. And you won't be like wasting $120 on a university where you don't want to. But definitely you will have your safe schools with you just to be safe.
Yeah.
But trust me, you'll get into a great school if you're thinking about it from now on. Yeah.
चलो ठीक है फिर मेरा नहीं होता तो I'll be like राघव सर ने बोला था मेरे को क्या करने होगा. But no, I understand where you're coming from, and maybe in the process I come up with some fresh ideas, so maybe it will not be that futile anyway. My another question is to ma'am, Mehek ma'am. You said that your research work is currently under review. So how do you present that, or how do you attach that work in your application?
As additional work, they just ask you to send in some additional work, and there's an option over there. It doesn't have to be published because, as they have already mentioned, that your work is what that matters. It is the quality of your work that matters. The publication doesn't. Even if it's not published, that is not an issue. If you have worked on a project, and they will obviously read it, because there's specialized faculty that will be going through your work, that will be reviewing your work. So don't think about publication. There is a separate column where you can attach additional documents. So in that
So like if your entire manuscript goes.
yeah, your entire manuscript goes. So
Or you can even put excerpts from your manuscript into that if you don't want to spend your entire
so there is
manuscript.
one particular option, and you can consolidate. Basically, you can bind both your research papers in one file and attach that particular file. So they will review it on their own then.
All right. So basically, then they'll be reviewing our aptitude for research and technical writing then. And
Yeah,
that is
exactly. They will go through your work, and they will make sure, they will see that it is not plagiarized from somewhere, and it is some actual original work that you have done.
Right, but again, this thing is also optional. But like, I did submit my research work in several universities where the option was there, but not all universities have an additional documents option. So, like for instance, if you've written a research paper and still under review, you can write it in your CV that it's still under review in a peer-reviewed international journal. So you can write that.
Yeah, it depends on university to university.
But,
CMU particularly required it. Like they had an option, so I put it up.
Yeah.
Also, like, because most of the work goes in, like most of the people who are applying at the time of their application, the work doesn't get published. I was lucky to get published research papers back then, but it really doesn't matter if you put it in the review stage or you just keep that you did this project. It doesn't matter if you write that it's in review, because the reviewer can't cross check it, right? It's just you can just, it's the point you made about lying. You can just use it here, right? Because if they ask for a, I'm just telling you, I'm not saying you will be lying in your applications. I just informed you regarding that. And also, I can see many people are asking questions in the chat. I am sure that we'll answer that in this webinar, or we'll make sure that we give some sort of answers. I think Sankalp and Angad, please make sure that people are not missed out upon their questions.
Sure.
And you just keep a note of them.
All right. Okay. I wanted to know that, is having a name of a professor on your work important?
Not really. It's the work that matters.
Yeah.
I didn't understand the question. Like, what do you mean by having a professor's name on your work? Like a co-author or something like that?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
All right, okay. So I mean, so like a lot of juniors over here are interested in research, and like I'm a third year, so they come up to me and then they're like, how can we do it? How can we sort of begin working with it? So, and currently, because the college was suspended and there are not many lab facilities, so they were really concerned about how they can actually start working. So I did not know really what to tell them, because you can always obviously contact professors, but then how will that pan out? So I think it was a question for everybody over here, that they can start working on stuff, and they can start at least working on something like a review paper where they're reading papers, and they don't really need support like that as such. Last question is that you said that you were elaborating the difference between an MTech and an M in engineering and an MS, but there are a lot of MS options in India also, like IISc, and some people over here had also a lot of questions over here, that what made you choose, say, pursuing an education abroad, and why not here, maybe say like an MS, maybe even in an IIT. So yeah, I mean, what do you think about IISc and ISERS, and maybe some very special government institutions, like say the one which is for forest services or remote sensing and etc. in Dehradun?
So I'd like to answer that, because like when I interned at IIT Bombay, my perception about our field in particular, that how the facilities are there at IITs and everything, completely changed. I believe that IITs are at up to a certain standard right now. When it comes to our field, they are not very far behind US universities. So you should definitely explore that option. And many of the professors in IITs are also have done their PhD from good reputed outside the universities in US. So don't discourage IITs in any way. IISc, or especially IISc, is one of the most reputed institute in India, and I'm pretty sure that getting into an IISc is as difficult as getting into some of the top universities in US, because IISc, I think, takes in from GATE rankings and also have a specific exam. I'm not aware about the specific exam, but I'm pretty sure that they take it from GATE rankings. And recently, my friend got a good GATE rank, and he's going for IISc. And when I was planning to intern at IISc, and when I was looking through the profiles of professors, they're pretty good. it's pretty same from what is it's in US. So definitely don't discount education in India, especially when it's pretty reasonable and you're getting. And if your interest also lies in working in India, I think there are plenty of opportunities coming up in India, especially in terms of air pollution and most of the environmental problems which is happening in India are prevalent. Like the projects also which are doing in US, they are in collaboration with IITs here also. So you shouldn't discount India in any way. You can always pursue your PhD from outside. So there's the option to
Right.
go for that as well.
Thank you so much. I won't be taking any more of your time. Thank you all.
Thank you, Nimisha ma'am. Thank you, sir. Thank you, our panelists. To wrap up this webinar, I would just like to ask if you guys have any advice for current undergraduate environmental engineers or students of DTU or students in general who wish to pursue masters abroad.
Like we have already said it multiple times, I would just like to reiterate it that don't just stress on one particular aspect of your application. Pre-plan your whole process of applying to MS universities and work on each and every aspect of it.
And apart from that, please keep your mental peace and take care of your family along with
Exactly.
it. You shouldn't be too involved with the process right now. The situation is really bad. I just want to reiterate that MS application requires a complete 100% dedication towards this one goal. If you're saying you're 99% sure that you'll be going for master, I don't think you should just wait for a year. I would just say, but if you're like 100% sure that I'll be able to manage it, then please go for it.
Yeah, and don't worry about any of your volunteer experiences, because even I could not mention about my volunteer experiences while writing my essays. There were 3 essays we had while submitting, and I could not add it on. So it was just mentioned in my resume, but there was no proof given to my volunteer work. So particularly, I think for me, so don't worry about your volunteer experience, because for me, it did not really add a weightage, or, because there was no proof attached to what volunteer work I have actually done.
Also, like I would like to say that do not stress a lot about whether I'll be able to get an internship at a top corporate firm or a top university like IIT Bombay or IISc or a top foreign university. Do not fret about the name of the place where you've interned or where you've done a project. It's all about what you have done. So every experience comes in handy, and every experience is worth writing in your SOP. So do not worry a lot about whether you don't have a great name on your CV or not. It obviously does give up some brownie points, I must admit that.
Thank you so much.
Can I ask a doubt? I will take only 2 minutes for that.
Definitely.
Okay. So as in the webinar, the Mehak ma'am said that it's better to get an LOR from professor or the HODs. So, but for some students who might have worked with other assistant professors who knows better with have a better bonding with that professor. So is it better? What is better? Like whether we should directly contact the professors or the one which we have a smooth
The one
bonding.
you have worked with is the first priority. You can ask for an LOR from the professor in case you have not done any research work with any other professor. Because, like I mentioned, I did receive an LOR from Ms. Loveleen Gupta. She's not a professor; she's just an assistant professor. But her LOR was important for me because I have done research under her. So she was able to write about my work. So that is what that matters. So if you're working under some direct mentorship, then it is better to get an LOR from that particular professor, whether it is assistant professor or the HOD. But in case you have not done any sort of research work, in that case, I would say just directly contacting the main professor would be more impactful.
Does it hampers for the selection point of view from the university? Like, is it appreciable to have an LOR from professors? Like, they do consider this factor while selecting?
It is actually, it's mandatory to submit 2 LORs from the professor of your college in most of the universities.
Professor, not assistant professors.
No.
No, assistant professors. I personally submitted LORs from 2 assistant professors. So it's completely all right.
This is a suggestion that my seniors had given me when I had asked them while drafting my LORs. So it depends. So if you have done any sort of research work, so just directly you contact your assistant professor, it doesn't matter. So don't worry about that.
Okay, thank you. One more doubt. Sorry for taking time. Since I joined DTU in 2018 and around 2020 it was a lockdown. So when I was in fourth semester, early days there was a lockdown, and I'm from biotechnology. So most of the internship were conducted in a virtual manner for me, and I haven't got any wet lab experience because of this pandemic. I got an opportunity in Canada as an international internship, but the things got shattered due to this COVID restrictions. So I do not have right now any wet lab experiences. So is it going to hamper in my resume or SOPs because I haven't
No,
experienced?
it will not, because it was pandemic last year also, and it was compulsory for us to do internship after a third year as well. So, and most of us also had remote internships. So it does not, and especially my EY internship, which I had last year, it was a completely remote internship. So it doesn't matter, because obviously the pandemic is all around the world. Everyone is experiencing it. So it will not make a difference. All the universities will understand. It depends on what you have been able to gain from your internship. That is what matters at the end. So
And
don't
since
worry
the
about it.
pandemic is a global occurrence, I think universities are really empathetic about it, and then they really know the place you're coming from. So it doesn't matter if you've done your internship remotely or physically. They're completely fine with it because they know the situation that is currently in India. So don't worry about it. I had done a remote internship. Every one of us has
Yeah,
done.
most of us have
Yeah.
done remote internships. So
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Sir, I have a small question for you, sir. Sir, actually, I remember attending a similar MS webinar last year organized by SKI itself, and I remember the two panelists laid a lot of stress on aligning your research on which pertain to international issues, like not basically localizing your research to Delhi or something like that. And after attending today's webinar, I feel that we do tend to get a bit too emotional about research. So, matlab, what should be the basic mindset while approaching research?
The webinar we are talking about, I also attended that webinar.
Even I attended.
So yeah, it's pretty
Yes, sir.
nostalgic to hear that. But like again, they must have been when you're talking about research, it's very vague and it's very subjective also. So it's their own personal experience. I am not discounting them of anything. I'm pretty sure that whatever guidance they gave at that time really meant a lot. I think the point you're talking about doing work in Indian scenario and doing work in international scenarios. It really depends on your research. It really depends on the opportunity you have got. You should make the most of the opportunity. You're not necessary to get an international opportunity every time, especially when it's the time of this pandemic and virtual internships are happening. Having said that, all the studies which are conducted in our domain, which is environmental engineering in India, I think they are pretty different from all the studies which are conducted outside India, because most of the environmental pollution we are facing in India is it's on the higher end. So whatever research you are doing, I think it creates a huge impact because you're really working on the health impacts of on the people. So when it comes to our field, I don't think it matters a lot. But for the fields which are different, which for different departments, there may be different criteria. But it's always better to have an international paper which is more towards which covers more covers international audience rather than Indian people.
Okay, I guess that.
Okay, thank you, sir, and congratulations to all of you. ITS
So can I ask one question?
Sir, I have a question.
Excuse
Sir,
me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but due to time constraints, we have to end this here. If you have any questions, you can email it to the SKI ID given in the chat. I know our panelists are answering our questions with extreme patience and with utmost information, but we have some time constraints.
You can always reach out to us on LinkedIn. I'm free, right? I'm sure everyone is free these days, so you can always reach out. So don't worry that if your question wasn't answered. I think all of us in this panel, and if you need any other help, we are always there for you. So please reach out to us on LinkedIn. I think I'll ask Sankalp and Agya to share our LinkedIn profiles as well, so that people can reach out there as well. No issues there. Please don't worry if your question wasn't answered.
Also, I'm really thankful to you guys for your time, for explaining all the doubts so clearly, and for explaining all those things with so patience. Thank you so much.
So just if you could just take last question, like realistically, how much does it cost, like to study?
And can we get a scholarship?
And what about scholarships and everything? How easy is to get?
To be very honest, if you getting a scholarship depends a lot on on a particular university. Say, for example, getting a scholarship at a dream school will be way more difficult than getting a scholarship in a safe school. So you have to prioritize whether finances is your main priority or whether the choice of university is your main priority. See, there's no doubt in the fact that attending a university in America is extremely expensive, and we also, like, most of us do take loans for that. And it's all about it all depends on you, what your priorities are, whether your priorities are financial or education. It all depends on that.
So if you don't mind just giving a number of how much.
It really depends. It
Depends on the university.
So if you want like an average number, I'll just give you the range. But I'm just a spoiler alert, like caution that it's not definite to all the universities. It might range from 20 lakhs to 50 lakhs if I'm talking about the whole program. But it really depends on the university. Please don't take my word for it. Just explore the universities written very clearly on each university's website.
Yeah.
So you should please look at that.
Also, I would suggest while shortlisting university, just make a spreadsheet where you write down every university's name. You write down factors, like even basic factors like what's the temperature there, what's the tuition cost, who the professors are, what's the research work. So making a spreadsheet really helps you shortlist universities.
Sir, I have a very small question. I wanted to
And in
ask.
continuation to it,
Please, guys, if you have any question, you can email it to the ski email ID given in the chat.
Alternatively, we will be also providing their LinkedIn accounts on the group, so you can reach them out from there. I also have reached them out, actually, all of them, and they have responded very well, so you can do that as well. So with this, I believe we will be wrapping this session right now. Thank you, sir and ma'am, for giving your valuable time here. Really, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you
for organizing this. Thank you.
Good effort. Bye everyone. Take care.
Yeah, take care, everyone.